first, technology was always something that I've always been interested in. If I could rely on a computer or machine to do my thinking, that was the way I went from back in the day. I've always been, I can code in certain languages. That was kind of something that I always, did on the side just for fun and something that I like to do. But on the operational side of it, it would always bother me that we were either short on drivers or looking for drivers or needing a truck and getting stuck with things. And then like the situation that you mentioned earlier about not every client's going to the same location. And sometimes you're losing business because you're priced too high, because you're not competitive, because you don't have a truck that's going to wherever. So there needed to be a solution for that.
Nisrine, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Jared.
Yeah, well, I don't get to talk to other marketplaces or load boards, and this is a real treat for me. I'm excited what we can learn today from this, and I just know that there's before we hit record, just so many similarities. So I think we'll digest that and really get into it. But how did you find yourself in moving freight, like moving and storage type freight? Household goods, I think, is what you say we referred to.
Yes. So the moving and storage. So initially, prior to my career in moving and storage, I did work for a freight forwarder in Grapevine, Texas for a short period. It's like 3 years. My background was in sales. And so I kind of started there. And at the time, my boyfriend worked for a moving company and said, "Hey, let's start a moving company." And I said, "Okay." So I was in sales, and it just kind of was, natural to me to sell. So I just got into this, moving and storage, and not really knowing anything about trucking other than the 3 years of experience that I had working for this freight forwarder. So really kind of had to learn a whole new industry about household goods and what people are looking for when they're moving from state to state, and, learning the whole estimating process and learning how to, get a DOT number and get insurance and, go through all of the licensing and logging, and just from scratch. I had to learn an industry from zero. But really, it all started from sales. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. So I knew I would end up being, a business owner myself one day. I just didn't really know what I would be doing. And I did not think it would be in trucking either. So I just kind of fell into it, honestly. And it was a little addictive. So it was something that I really liked. It was great money. And there was always a demand. Besides, I think when the recession happened, there was a little bit of cutback. And I think the last year or so, it's kind of been slower in the moving and storage just because of housing prices and interest rates and stuff. So we kind of saw a little bit of fall in business because of that. But that's kind of how my whole journey started in moving and storage. And then it eventually evolved to, Movers Dispatch Board, where I'm at now. And I'm still running the moving company too. So I'm doing both, which is very busy.
So going back though, your boyfriend at the time, where did that idea even come from? Was he working for a mover or? Okay.
Yeah, he was working for a mover, and it was just kind of a summer thing for him. He was just making good money and just said, "Hey, you should do this." And I said, "Okay." You do the moves. He was doing the operations, and I was doing the sales and the office side of things. And so we kind of just grew from having just an extra bedroom in our house. We were in our early 20s, didn't really have much money, but just kind of started really small and then grew from there.
When I think of moving, and I know we'll get into more of this, but obviously there's the 2 men in a truck, like the local ones. But when you all started, was this cross state lines, over the road, long distance? That was the focus. It wasn't, hey, we're going to move somebody 20 miles away or even 50 miles away. It was several hundred miles.
Correct. And the thought process behind that is it takes the same amount of time to sell a job, to book a job, or book a client who's moving, whether they're moving locally or out of state. And his thought process in mind was, would you rather spend, a couple of hours doing a sale that's going to make, bring in $600 of revenue or under $1,000 of revenue, or would you spend your time booking something that's going to make $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000? So it's the same sales cycle. It's the same. So we really focused on interstate moving, and that was really our niche, and it still is till today. Interstate, we don't really do. We'll do an apartment move, but that's really not our bread and butter. It's just the margins are really small, and the cost is still the same. It's still the cost to acquire the lead is going to still cost the same, but the the amount of revenue is obviously a lot less. So it just didn't make sense for our model.
I'd like to get in the weeds a little bit because it's just for my own knowledge. So when you look at the movers and storage, again, I've seen those semis out there. For the average house today, can one semi transport that, or is it multiple? Like the industry average for when people are moving, can they get it all done in one trailer, or is it more?
I mean, if it's a 53-foot trailer, you can usually have a couple of homes, depending on how big. So
a couple homes in one truck,
depending on the size of their home, obviously. So if you're moving a 2,000 square foot home, usually it's somewhere around 1,800 cubic feet, 2,000 cubic feet. So you'll need more than a straight truck. So it just really depends on the size of the home. If you're moving a bunch of 2-bedroom homes, and you can put more on a semi than one. Now, if you're moving a 5,000 square foot home, you're going to probably need a semi. So it just depends on the size of the move.
I guess that brings up another question I didn't even think of and then I have other ones behind that. But when you say moving multiple homes, like if you're moving someone from Arlington, where you're based out of, to Santa Fe, like the probability that you're going to be moving to that direction, but is that common that you'll be moving 2 different houses on one load?
So no, and that's the thing, is that with where we're a little bit different than with freight. With freight, you've got set routes and set times where you're departing here. You have to be at a certain location. So the scheduling and the dispatching of that's a little bit easier. With household goods, every client's moving to a different location.
Yeah,
they have different timelines. They may be moving to, let's say you've got Phoenix, Arizona, you've got Los Angeles, and you've got Seattle. Okay. Everyone's kind of headed in the west, but they may all have different, time periods of when they want delivery. They may need storage. They may not. So what we typically do is we'll bring everything in and then consolidate onto a truck. And then that's kind of like when I talk to you more about Movers Dispatch Board, that's kind of how the evolution of Movers Dispatch Board came about. It was solving that issue where you have all these shipments that have different timelines, they're different sizes, and sometimes they don't all align together where you can send a full truck to a location. So the solution with that was that you're able to interline for other movers and get capacity, or if you're stuck with a shipment that's 2,000 pounds, you're not going to run a truck for 2,000 pounds. It just doesn't make sense. You're going to be overpriced. You won't be able to book the job. You won't be able to book the business, or really, you'll be losing money at that point. So,
man, there's so much I just want to know about this industry. So when you guys your company, the first company, are you all doing all the packing? I mean, because I know there's different levels when you get into moving. Like you can get the white glove approach, like full turnkey, like, hey, here's the keys. I'll see all my stuff in Oregon, or you can do more. But like, I guess, is that part of the service too, that you guys can do everything to a little bit? Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So I would just tell clients, we'll do as much as you want us to do. If you want us to come in and just wrap the furniture and disassemble and load the truck and you're packing all your boxes, no problem. If you want us to pack the boxes, we'll pack the boxes too. We'll do whatever they want us to do, because everyone's different. Some people prefer to pack their own boxes. Someone may be relocating, the company's not covering packing. They want to do their own packing. Some companies are covering everything at 100%. So we'll come in and do everything, and they don't have to do anything. So it just depends. Every move is different. It's never the same. So I think that's the interesting thing about the moving and storage industry, is your customers are the same. Everyone's different, and every situation is different.
If someone's moving let's just say a 3,500, 4,000 square foot house, you got the moving people out there, but can you talk about the crews that are, and like how many people it takes to basically, move that house from origin destination? And then I guess I'm always curious when you see these movers going down the road. I mean, is the labor inside the truck with them, or are they driving separate, I guess? Because some of those trucks too, they're huge. I mean, that's one thing, and I don't know about your all's fleet, but like these mover trucks, like they're big RVs, like the semi trucks. I mean, huge, that they kind of go hand in hand.
The majority, I can't speak for every moving company out there. But for the majority of companies out there, they typically have a driver and a helper. Typically, one additional person is traveling with the driver. It's not common to have a whole crew drive with the truck. It's not practical or common. So you typically don't have that happen. What usually happens is moving companies will get labor at the destination where they end up going. So they'll have local guys at the location. Let's say they're going to Orlando, Florida. There will be local guys that they can get from another moving company that can come help. Sometimes it's staffing agencies that staff for labor. A new thing that we're releasing into this week with Movers Dispatch Board is a labor portal that we haven't released it yet. But the nice thing about our labor portal is it'll give moving companies an ability to go online and find labor wherever they're going. So, and even if they need it for their home location, it happens a lot in peak season where we're short staffed. But you don't really want to overstaff during the summer, because in the winter months, since we're so seasonal, you don't want to end up laying off a bunch of people. So that's always really hard. So it's nice to be able to have it in a portal where you can go in and find, guys who are just looking for some part-time work, some extra cash, maybe on the side or things like that on the weekends.
When you look at the, again, I'm referring to these loads that are going across the country. Talk about this, the market, like how many moving companies are out there? I mean, I don't need specifics, but I guess I don't think of it as a huge market. But again, there's a lot of people in this country that are moving all the time, and obviously there's been big migrations over the past few years in certain areas. But and is the industry, I guess what I'm getting at, is it very fragmented? Again, you can name like the top big companies that you see all the time, like the moving companies, the ones you got TV commercials and all that. But like, how many of those others are behind the scenes, the ones that you probably don't see?
Yeah. So with FMCSA, there's approximately about 7,000 registered moving companies licensed to haul household goods nationwide. But then with FMCSA, those aren't all the ones that are maybe just licensed locally in their own state, because not all moving companies are hauling interstate. So some of them are just doing local moving. So they're within their own state. But on the interstate side, you're looking at about roughly about 7,000. The big van lines that you're referring to with the national campaigns and companies, that's a franchise pretty much. You can kind of look at it as a Subway or a big franchise, and a lot of their locations are privately owned by moving companies that are hauling for that agent. They're agents for that van line. The nice thing about the van line business is they have kind of an upper hand on a lot of national accounts, because they're able to kind of service more, because they have a bigger reach on a national level. Downside is the pricing. They're typically a lot higher than privately held moving companies, because they don't have that overhead and the franchise fees and the fees that are involved. But the private side is almost just as big as the van line side. So, and now more so, I think we're kind of seeing more of a shift that's going to the independent. But the independents have a very strong play in the game.
How over the last 20 years that you've kind of seen this industry, obviously you've had some of these mobile container storage units and stuff like that, but how has that changed or impacted the industry? I mean, there's big names like U-Haul now that they're even got theirs, and why am I drawing a blank? The one that was started by the firefighter that's the one we use when we move, where they drop it and then pick it back up. But like, how has that kind of changed the industry?
I think there's a market for everything, whether there's place for everything. If it fits that person's move and logistically how they're wanting to do things. And I don't think that we've seen a huge cutback in full service moving because of the container moving. The container moving is great if you have the muscles and the power to, go in and lift everything and stack it properly and wrap everything properly, then great. It works for some people. In some situations, I've had friends who are, or even clients that say, hey, I'm thinking about doing what other, I'm not going to mention any names like the brands, but I'm going to use the mobile storage container to move from here to Florida. I just say, hey, just do your math, go do the price comparison and see how it compares to hiring a full service mover. Most situations it ends up being more expensive. In some situations it could be less. So it just depends. But for me, I think with moving, the hardest part is the loading and unloading. I don't want to do that labor. So for me, that's the hardest part. It may be easier to drive the truck, but then again, I don't even like driving my car cross country. So I'm not sure I would want to take the risk of trying to drive any kind of truck, whether it be like a small truck or, and then if you're home, if you're moving a 5,000 square foot home, everything's not going to fit in a straight truck. You're going to need 2 straight trucks. So who's going to drive the other truck? Or how many times are you going to go back and forth to where you're moving? So sometimes it doesn't make sense, but sometimes it makes sense. Like it might be less expensive to rent a truck, just like it's variable,
I want to get into Movers Dispatch Board, but the last one, just talking about the industry as a whole, I guess I would see the labor part of this industry because like nobody likes moving, but I could see like it's very strenuous, like moving stuff out of a basement or downstairs and disassembling something. I bet there's got to be, I assume there had to be a crazy labor shortage for movers, especially, after COVID, but talk about like, that just seems like that's got to be a special sector or industry of people to do that.
It's very hard. Sometimes people don't last the weekend. So the movers, not so much the drivers, but it's very labor intensive. And, we're in Texas. It's really hot in the summer. It's 100 degrees. Nobody wants to do that kind of work. So the labor part of it's very difficult. I mean, you'll have guys that will stick around. We've had in our company, I can say we've had guys that have been there for, over 20 years doing that job, which is insane to me. I guess they just like, they know how to lift. They know their job. So, but you'll have some rookies come in and they don't last the summer, they don't last the season because it's hard work. So that is always really difficult. I think that's the staffing part of it. That's the hard part. And even some drivers don't even want to drive for household goods because they have to help load and unload. And freight drivers they're going dock to dock. So it's nice. They don't have to worry about, pulling up to someone's home and then getting all their furniture unloaded. And, at the origin, you're disassembling furniture, blanket padding furniture, you're doing inventories on everything. So it's a very labor intensive process. And then obviously loading and then transporting and then unloading, reassembly, taking blankets off. It's a long day.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a lot of unexpected. I just like you get in a house, you don't know what you're going to get into. And I just think that, there's so many things that, every day is different. Well, let's talk about Movers Dispatch Board. Like tell us a story. What gave the idea behind, obviously you were in it, so you saw the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always a shortage of drivers. There's always a shortage of drivers. There's always a shortage of trucks. There's always a shortage of guys, and first, technology was always something that I've always been interested in. If I could rely on a computer or a machine to do my thinking, that was the way I went from back in the day. I've always been, I can code in certain languages. That was kind of something that I always, did on the side just for fun. Is something that I like to do. But on the operational side of it, it would always bother me that we were either short on drivers or looking for drivers or needing a truck and getting stuck with things. And then like the situation that you mentioned earlier about not every client's going to the same location. And sometimes you're losing business because you're priced too high, because you're not competitive, because you don't have a truck that's going to Iowa, or wherever. So there needed to be a solution for that. And with moving and storage, I felt like we were the last to get a lot of technology. So freight was more advanced. There was technology everywhere, but for whatever reason, moving companies just were the last to kind of catch up to. Now, I think in the last couple of years, our software is getting better, CRMs are getting better, and there's more technology out there for movers that are starting to finally go digital on a lot of stuff where it was paper for the longest time. So on the dispatching side of it, you've got your competitors, you've got your load board, and there's so many, that concept has been proven on the freight side of it, but on the household goods side of it, that didn't exist. So to me, it just baffled me that, and I thought about it for many years, that there should have been a solution for that. And I finally took the plunge and said, you know what, I'm going to do this because I believe that this idea is going to work for the moving and storage industry. We're always short. And right now it's a manual process. It was, hey, let me see who I can find out in California and see if they have any loads I can bring back so I'm not running my truck empty, or WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups, or just, different unorganized groups out there that really, which I ran back numbers on all of the WhatsApp groups and stuff. And 50% of those companies that are, exchanging loads on there are not licensed or not licensed through FMCSA, which I'm totally against, So I wanted to have a reputable place that moving companies could go and get the resources that they need to interline loads or broker loads. So, and our brokering is a little bit different than the freight brokering situation, but that's kind of where the foundation of Reverse Dispatch Board went. And then as it's been growing, and I'm just constantly just been adding additional features, partnering with different companies to bring in the things that we need in the moving and storage space.
I didn't even realize that there would be, it's freight like everything else, but so there is brokering involved. Is it?
So for brokering for household goods, it's a little bit different because when we talk about a broker in the moving and storage space, it's basically essentially they're a sales office that's selling moving jobs. And it's, a sales team company that's booking jobs for moving, and then they take those jobs and sell them off to a moving company, and typically at like a 30% margin. And that's how the brokering works in moving and storage. They don't actually own any trucks. They don't have a warehouse. They don't actually touch anything. They're just nothing more than a sales team booking moving jobs, confirming, move dates, selling the whole service, and then having a moving company service the move.
So, on our load board, BulkLoads, like other load boards, we have 3 different customers. We got the trucking companies, the freight brokers, the shipping companies with the loads. Talk about Movers Dispatch. Who are the clients that are using that program? Because it almost seems like you might have another tier, but I don't want, almost seems like you might even have laborers, but I want you to speak.
Absolutely. So we're just adding that additional labor that you're mentioning. So our current subscriber base is going to be companies that are licensed to haul household goods. So if you're licensed to haul household goods, and you can get on, our insurance is different than, and I know we'll eventually can talk about that, but insurance for moving and storage is a little bit different than freight. So our levels of our liability and what we have to offer our clients is a little different. So you have to be licensed to haul household goods because the insurance part of it is a little different too. And you want to make sure that they're covered for household goods. So we would have moving companies that are, booking their own jobs, picking up and transporting, doing the whole thing. Carriers, there's a lot of carriers out there that are licensed to haul freight and household goods, but they have to be licensed to haul household goods. So it would be carriers. They typically don't have a sales team that they're booking jobs. They're just transporting. They're just transporting for moving companies. And then moving brokers, who are the sales office that I mentioned to you, that are booking jobs on a national level and then just selling them off to moving companies. And then we're adding on the laborers part of it. And that's coming on very soon, probably by end of the week we launch that. But that will allow laborers, like moving helpers, to go online, create a profile, their availability, run a background check on themselves, and have a profile. And then when moving companies are looking for labor, whether it be in another city or their own city, they can just go on there and find staff to service the moves that they're trying to either load or unload off the truck or pack or unpack.
And then, do y'all make revenue subscription wise, or is it per load, or can you walk us through how?
So, I mean, we're subscription based. So it's based on a SaaS model. It's month to month. There's no long-term contract. It's super flexible. I'm not a big fan of subscriptions that tie you in for a long time because sometimes they help you out and sometimes they don't. So to contribute to our board, there's no charge. To post a truck, there's no charge. The only time we start charging is when someone's starting to receive loads off the board. So, and then based on how many loads they're receiving, then we have 3 different levels of subscription.
Nice. How is the market today overall?
I think the housing it's kind of picking up, but it always around summer months. Our peak seasons are, all the way up until September, from spring to around September time. And then we slow down. We really mirror real estate. So when real estate's, everyone's trying to, when their kids are out of school and when they're back in school, they're done. And everyone else is moving in the wintertime because they've got relocated for a job or they have to, relocate. But typically that's our off-season months. So the last couple of years have been slower across the board for moving companies. And that's just because of interest rates. I think everyone got happy with the 2.99%.
Yeah.
No one wants to pay 7.5% or 7%. We're like, oh my gosh, even though all-time record, that's not really that high historically, but it's high compared to what happened during COVID.
So, for guys that don't know, talk about the industry as far as I know. Trucking can be relative, whether you're pulling a van trailer or flatbed or a reefer trailer, hopper trailer, but can you give any insights of how drivers that are doing household freight get compensated? I mean, are they top of market, middle of market?
Yes, it really kind of just depends if they're driving a semi, if they have a CDL, or if they're driving a straight truck. We kind of pay, I can't speak for everyone, but most of the drivers are getting paid either by cubic footage or mileage. That's kind of the norm for a semi driver. So it's based on miles and what cubes they're loading. And then typically there's additional, compensation for add-on services that they may sell to the client. So definitely over 6 figures for salaries for a driver.
You said, again, I'd never heard of that. So they charge per cubic. Okay. And is that just because some trailers, they may have several houses on there versus just one?
Correct. Yes.
What about weight on household goods? I would assume that that's never really a factor, or is it?
It can be. It just depends on what we're hauling. So it depends on the shipment. If someone's moving more boxes, it's typically, heavier. If they're moving more furniture, it's going to be bulkier. With household goods, it also depends on, I know with freight, it's always whichever one is higher. Your client's paying on whatever is either heavier or, bulkier. So with household goods, it just depends on the contract that they have with the client. Most moving companies for interstate moving are charging per cubic foot for the shipment. So how much ever space the client's taking up in the truck. So it depends. And some work the weight method, like the military is weight based. So if you're hauling over the military, if you're relocating military personnel, you're gonna take the weight based methods with weight tickets and stuff. So you'll scale off.
That was another thing too. I was wondering with, so users of your board, like shippers and all that, I would think some companies pay for people to move, like jobs and all that. And that's usually done probably by a third party, right? That's handling the moving, or is that done by the family themselves?
So no one who's on our board is the actual consumer. We're a B2B. We're completely B2B. So,
okay. So you wouldn't find, like, if I wanted to move to wherever, I wouldn't be getting on there. It'd be B2B. Okay. Got it.
This would be hypothetically, you're a moving company based out of Chicago, Illinois. I'm in Dallas, and I'm running a truck to Chicago, and I need some loads coming back, so I'm not hauling empty. I reach out to you or look on the board and say, oh, Jared, do you have any loads I can bring back or haul? Are you hauling, or you need anything hauled back? So it's, or in another situation where I may have a load that I'm stuck with that's running up to Chicago, and it's not going to fill up a truck, or maybe all my trucks are tied up and I need to get it something delivered to a client. You happen to have a truck in the area and you call for me. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. When did you launch the board, and then how has activity been? And I guess overall, like where is the market right now as far as available loads?
Yeah. So I launched 2 years ago. Obviously I launched the board with no loads and no subscribers. So It was really hard in the beginning to try to get as many people on. I think it was a struggle because even with 200 subscribers in the beginning or 100 subscribers, you don't have enough loads to make it worthwhile. So I really had to strategically change up my plans and initially I offered free trials, and then would charge after. I've had to really kind of change my business model as it grows. And with SaaS and software, I'm sure, you've probably come across that too, where you kind of have to take a look at your business model and see, okay, what are my clients really looking for? That's why I eventually changed into the plan where everyone can post their trucks. There's no charge. You don't have to pay. We need you to be licensed. We don't want unlicensed haulers on there. But if you have a truck running, post it on there, and we want to be able to help you out, because if you're able to find loads on our board, then you'll want to pay. And then if someone sees your truck out there, they'll need that. So we're trying to help out as much as we can. And then if you're contributing to the board, there's no charge too. Like I said, the only time we charge is when you start finding loads. And at that point, we're saving you money. Even if you're able to get one load out a month, like our most expensive plan's $3.99 a month, you're already paid, like the subscription's already paid for itself right there. So our least expensive plan's $1.99 a month. So even if you're, hauling one load every, 3 months, $1.99 is really, it's just very affordable. But the loads, as now that we're kind of getting bigger, now we have more, people contributing to the board and to the truck board. So it's picking up. But with SaaS and software, it's kind of it's a marathon. It's not an instant.
We always said it was chicken the egg. You got to get the loads on, then you got to get, carriers on. So yeah, always dancing back and forth. You never, it depends on where the market is. If it's not a lot of loads out there, then you're trying to find more shippers on there. If not enough trucks, back and forth. But how do you, I have 2 more questions and I'll kind of land the plane here. But when you said people don't really start paying until they find loads, how do you know as the software that they're finding the loads and getting those loads?
They're requesting them. Once they request them and once they're on paid, we know that they're requesting stuff off the board. So just through a click, and we can count the number of clicks and how many people are actually requesting things and how many transactions are happening. So that's how we're able to scale it, obviously, because the information is completely hidden as far as like the company name and stuff until they click to request. Once they click to request, now we have a ticker. We know that someone's interested in something. So
even if they said they're not interested after that, it would be.
Well, it kind of gets us, we're kind of based all of our numbers on facts and things that are happening. So we just kind of look at overall analytics on the site and how are people behaving on the site, and just have to go from there. And then I personally will reach out to a lot of people too. So I keep the subscriber base. I check that daily and try to, send out surveys, reach out to people, make connections with people, and just talk to it. And I love talking to the subscriber base because it's funny. I say that they are me because I am a moving company owner as well. So I have a lot in common with them. So I really can kind of really relate to the things that they're looking for and the struggles and why they even got onto Universal Dispatch Board. I know there is a need for the product. So, and the other thing too, with loads, like you mentioned, with loads being down in the market, definitely I got into Universal Dispatch Board when the market was down in household goods. I did not jump into it probably at the most ideal time. But at the same time, I think that it's not a bad thing as with software, and you're in software as well, is that it's better to kind of build it from a solid base and kind of grow it versus overthink everything. Start with smaller features at first to make sure that they function properly and they're solid, and then kind of grow from there. And then just slowly add on additional things and build it up to, I'd rather have less features in the beginning, but just know that they're stable and they work.
Yeah.
Versus overdevelop and over create all these functions and features, but they don't work, so that's not a good place to be.
How do you instill trust in the marketplace? That's a big question, and we get answered all the time, but how does somebody know that, hey, this is a trustworthy site, the business on here, the other people contributing, the loads are on here, are good, trustworthy? Like that's always the key.
Number one, that's why I did a lot of things that I did. So I partnered with a company called LoadGuard, and with LoadGuard, there's a bunch of different brands out there that do something very similar, but LoadGuard's my partner currently. And every company who creates a profile on our load board has access to LoadGuard. So you're able to click the profile, you're able to see, how long they've been. Pretty much all of the data that FMCSA has, like their licensing, if they're active, their active insurance, just how many roadside inspections, VIN tied to the company. So we provide the subscriber all the information, so they don't have to have a subscription with LoadGuard. So they get it from us directly to kind of build trust with whoever they're signing on there. And we keep a really close eye on who is able to have a subscription and who we keep on. And like I said, I'm really big about not having non-licensed moving companies on the platform, because we service the moving and storage industry, and I'm trying to build a reputable brand with Movers Dispatch Board, and not moving scams are a big thing in our industry, and I'm sure they are in the freight industry as well. So I'm really big on making sure that whoever's on our platform, that we don't have any of that activity happening. And if we do, then we just have to just let them go. So
yeah, because I think of in our industry, we're commodities, guys are moving a load of corn that may be valued at $15,000. And that's a full truckload. And we can get into some, fertilizers and stuff that are higher, but like some of these household goods, on the high end, in my head, I'm thinking jewelry and guns, and I don't know if they put all that in there with the moving, but like there's got to be some serious trust on the truck that's moving that down the highway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why I was telling you, like, insurance is different for us, our liabilities are different. So it's really important to have a company that you can trust on the board. And that's why we keep a really close eye on that, because that's one thing that when I do talk to subscribers, that's the first thing they tell me. Well, how do I trust whoever's on there or who's going to request my load? That's a scary thought, to try to give someone that you don't know someone's household goods and just assume that they're going to do a good job. So we really, the partnership with LoadGuard, I think, is a really good one. And then another partnership that we implemented was through escrow.com. So escrow.com, I'm sure you've heard of them. eBay Motors uses them as well. And basically it's just if there's any balances, because that's another thing that people are like, how am I going to get paid? Are they going to pay me? Well, we partnered with them. So that way you can kind of create an escrow account and have the money held in escrow. So when shipment's been delivered and everything's verified, you get paid, and you don't have to worry about whether you're going to get paid or not.
Man, this has been fascinating. I really appreciate you reaching out, and it's not our typical podcast or story, but when I saw that it was another load board, I was like, I'd love to speak to these people. And again, if you look at the load board space as a whole, there's really maybe 20 or less, and probably even less than that really exist out there. And again, we always say, kind of the riches are in the niches, are finding those specialty. And we never really went out to go do a general freight board because we saw like, hey, we want to do bulk. So I commend you for focusing just on the niche of moving. And I think it's just phenomenal that you're laser focused on that and not worried about, hey, can we do flatbed freight and blah, blah, blah freight and all this other stuff. So, I just want to congratulate on that. The last question I have, and this is, this relates to your industry, but this is more on an off the wall, bizarre one. In your years of moving, what's been the most bizarre thing that sticks out that you moved and been like, what the heck is this, that you can share with us? I'm sure, by the way you're laughing, there's probably several.
There's things I can't share because who knows who's listening. So we'll have to leave those for some off-screen stories. But I think the funniest one, and I was pretty young, I was in my early 20s, and we had a client who moved from a really nice part of Dallas, and nice furniture, just several $1 million home. Everything was high end. And I was young. I didn't really catch on to what was happening at the time, but the wife was very adamant about being on the contract. And I had been talking to the husband, and she made a really big deal about being on the contract. And I just remember having like a couple of conversations with her and him, and she's like, she had to be on it. I was like, okay, I added her on the contract. So they both signed and everything. And we brought their items into storage. And I think it was maybe about 6 weeks later, she called and said, well, we're ready for delivery. And I said, okay, great. So got her set up, got her delivered, and everything got delivered. So a week later, I get a call, and it's the husband. And then he says, we're ready for delivery. And I said, I literally had a heart attack, I think, over the phone. I didn't know what happened. I just was in awe. I think I'm like maybe 25 at the time, but still really young in business. I'm just not really sure why my husband's calling me now when we just delivered. I don't know, what do I say, So I just said, 1 moment, sir. And I put him on hold, and I went to my partner and I said, hey, look, the husband is calling, and he said he wants delivery. Where did we deliver this stuff? Like, I know it was her. I remember, like, I knew her. I knew who she was. I talked to him several times. And so he said, well, just tell him that the wife called. I mean, what else are you going to tell him? I get back on the phone, and I'm going to say, sir, your wife called last week, and we delivered the goods to her. And literally, like, he just went crazy on me, but not mad at me. But what had happened is they were going through a divorce. Yeah. And I didn't realize that was happening. And basically, she took everything. So,
oh my gosh,
that's the one that just stood out from in my brain for the longest time, because I didn't really realize they didn't ever said anything about a divorce was happening, and I should have had an attorney reach out to us and just say, don't deliver. But that happens a lot, where not the person still takes everything, but people will be in the middle of a move, and then they'll get divorced in the middle, and then they have to come in and split the shipment up. And that's kind of a mess. That doesn't happen in freight, but I will never forget that story, because I was just so
and then you guys are in the middle of it all.
Shocked. Yeah, just shocked. And he obviously, he was upset. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm not upset with you. This had nothing to do with you. And talked to our attorney. He was like, look, this happened. I was so worried. And he's like, well, she's on the contract. You didn't do anything wrong. So that happened. So that was a crazy story.
That is crazy and very unfortunate, but I can see how that could happen. And so for people that want to learn more about your program and even find you online, where do people go?
I'm on LinkedIn, so I always respond to my messages. Hopefully they're not sponsored ads, but I love for people to reach out and make connections. I've met so many amazing people through LinkedIn. So I do respond to my DMs on LinkedIn. So definitely reach out to me there. On the Instagram page and stuff, I have my marketing girl do all that. So if you reach out to me there, I would probably eventually see it. But if you're wanting to connect, definitely do it through LinkedIn. And that's kind of the best way to reach me.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, congratulations so far on this journey. I commend you. And, you're not new, but welcome to the load board space. I think, we'll have to share more stories. Would love, we're 14 years on BulkLoads. So, we're still learning, but we've learned a lot along the way, and always happy to pass that on to others that are out there trying to build a platform like that. So congratulations. And to our listeners, go find Nisrine Masri if you're interested, or know other people that are interested in this space. So thank you so much for coming on the BulkLoads podcast. God bless you.
Thank you, Gary.